Disclaimer: the information and education material contained herein is meant to promote the general understanding and dialogue of GAN's processing. Such information is not meant or intended to serve as a substitute for a healthcare professional's clinical training, experience, or judgment. For patients and individuals, such information is not to be a substitute for professional medical, therapeutic, or healthcare advice or counseling. For medical issues or concerns, including decisions about medications and other treatments, readers, viewers, listeners should always consult their physician or, in serious cases, seek immediate assistance from emergency personnel. Prescription information, procedures, and use of medical devices information should be undertaken only by properly trained and certified medical personnel. We specifically disclaim any warranties, express or implied, including implied warranties of merchantability or fitness for a particular purpose. Such information is provided, as is, and is believed to be accurate at the time of its publishing, but it is the viewer's job to evaluate the accuracy of any information found in this presentation. Every case presented is of their own experience, applied by themselves for themselves, and it applies to their case only. Every person experiencing health problems should seek professional medical advice and consult their course of treatment with a doctor. The processes of plasma balancing described herein are a natural process which supports the body but does not replace medical advice or therapies one is already subject to.
Well, good afternoon, everyone. It's interesting.
Good afternoon.
I created these titles about 2 months ago, and it's interesting how things dovetail together. So I want to welcome the team here. We are represented in many languages, in many countries, many continents, and we're kind of bringing up the rear with respect to the knowledge seekers workshops coming on Thursday, the Brazilian community charging ahead on Friday, and here we are on Sunday, the day after Valentine's Day. So it's a very interesting subject, and the timing is also very interesting. This is the Keshe Foundation Spaceship Institute teachings on plasma science. We're still in the basic PICO tech and cleaning it up because there's a lot of biggety banggety to talk about. My name is Alexander. I am from Canada. It is February the 15th, 2026. This is part of the Keshe Foundation North America Plasma Education Series. So thank you all for being here and making this such an important event. We've been trying to, over the years, put together the bite-sized pieces and make people not only aware, but enhance their ability to discuss. So we needed new terminology, and that's where we started. And we've been adding terminologies as we go along, because when you talk about something that's new and you're using words that relate to something that's old, you start to understand why we can't bridge that gap between the old knowledge and the new knowledge. Of course, there's another thing that confounds us, and that has to do with the fact that actually people are blowing up these bridges. And so we need to do a little blowing up on our own. And we've been going through the Picotech series. We started with the Pico core, forms of construction, deconstruction, reconstruction, the Pico star, and yeah, today the Biggety Banggety. And you really have to understand how serious this is when the famous TV show serialized the Big Bang Theory as a comedy series, and rightly so, because we are in the process of defining matter, and what matter is the manifestation of energy. And so that terminology initially invited confusion because the small m matter state, which is the physical, is the old science, and the capital M matter state is the new science. And the manifestation we now understand is a form of binding. And so in that form, it becomes a form of creation. And so we ask ourselves, what did we do in the beginning? How, our favorite question was, which came first, the chicken or the egg? And it's kind of a, sarcastic question, but the answer is the first came the principal matter. And that's why it's called the principal matter, because in the beginning, there were PM ticks that are traveling all through the universe. And of course, they're magnetical now, we understand. These are energy packs that are traveling all over, and they diverge, come from different directions, and they combine into a dilution field of a force field. And in that process, we create a plasmagen conversion, which is the combination of the antimatter, dark matter, and the mattergen. But in order for it to manifest in physicality, it has to interact with another maggrav condition. And the interaction of one maggrav with another maggrav is called an inertia field interaction. And so to understand that, we have to understand what the difference is. Well, the most confusing thing, of course, was time. And the physicality allows something that is kind of unique, and that is a delay in consequences. Consequences always are a result of action. And so these results could be visible or tangible, but they also may be non-visible or non-tangible. But the key point is they can be delayed or they can be instantaneous. And this is not really a new discussion. This has been going on for a long, long time. So when we look at destruction, we have to understand that it is not possible to have destruction. You say, well, when two forces come together, is it destruction or is it creation? You see, the destruction is a kind of creation. So you always have to ask yourself is what kind of creation are you creating? And that is the attribute of the crudeness of the matter state. So the matter state really is our matter plasma dimension, which, as we say, the small m matter, we can touch it and we can see it, but the capital M matter, we can't touch it and can't see it. And so the plasma dimension is part of the feeding, but the matter plasma dimension is part of the feedback. So whether we can see it or we cannot see it, man is always feedback dominant in one way or another, and every excuse under the sun is acceptable. But here we are emerging outside of the box of the old science. And in order to do that, we have to go beyond the limit where we can't see with our eyes. We have to see with our mind's eye, or we have to see with some kind of external device. And this has been a very serious problem because in the scientific community, verification and validation is only accepted and acknowledged if we have a man-made device to measure it. Well, remember, a man-made scientific device is in its physicality, and the plasma is not. So by definition, we are hindered from advancing. So we have to look outside of the box, and not only just outside of the box on the micro level, but we came into the nano state, which is 10 to the minus ninth, and then we found we can go another 3 levels of magnitude down to the PICO state, and we are continuing to explore. But as this is part of the PICO state series, it's instrumental in understanding why we're in the beyond the Beijing time, where the 2025 gold rush has begun. On May the 10th of last year, we were able to create gold out of thin air. And of course, this year it's expanding into the silver rush of 2026. But there are rushes all over the place. So the thing is that this was done in very short order. So upon reflection, when we look at construction, and you say, well, that could take hundreds of years because it's physical the way we understand it. But the destruction can take only minutes or even seconds. And all it requires is some kind of explosion. So, as we said, the destruction is a form of construction. But what if construction itself could be faster? And this is where the plasma science comes into play. Because if we want to see what is going on, let's look at nature set up that picture. And we use a frozen gas ball to see the gravitational core and the magnetical hairlines emanating from it. And so that becomes the construction zone, and it includes both operations there. But what is the source? And that would be the pico-atomic source that is within the monatomic state. And so this is where we've gone beyond that state to help us explain how we get to that transmutation highway and what is the difference. Our transmission-based reality on the carbon-12 deals with frequencies, but when we get on the transition highway of the carbon-14, we find a different connection and a different method of travel. And when we get on the transmutation highway, then we start to realize that there are some lies that we've been told that are just not making any sense. And so that becomes your first answer. When the answers that you've been given don't make any sense, and then you're given an alternative, which makes more sense than our education system has permitted, then different questions come in. So the things we do know and we can see all around us is we can see these waveforms. And of course, it causes us to do some kind of deviation from our standard path. So if we want to go a straight line, sometimes we have to drive a crooked mile. And that is part of the transmission, as we see here on the Karakoram Highway. So our movement is magnetical, but it consists of parts of the gravitational form, because we always gravitate towards that straight line, even though we have multiple deviations. So these deviations, of course, are the frequencies. And we can argue in a singularity, it's a sine wave. You go up and down and it's kind of uniform. But that's kind of an artificial situation because sine waves operate in duality or even more. And so we can just see by changing one dimension, we are creating a different kind of structure, even though it's the same thing. And so the question is it symmetrical? Is it a reflection? Or is it a reproduction of an original image? And then we find that we can modulate that, either by increasing the amplitude or overlapping different frequencies. So in order to answer these questions, which have stymied many students over the years, because of kinds of narratives that have been carried over for hundreds of years, we see when the books of Maranatha Kesh, such as in book number 1, we see the universal order of the creation of matter, where we're bringing together the matter, the dark matter, and the antimatter. And so that we bring it into singularity, but if we have the structure of light as outlined in book number 2, we can go from one unity to another unity, and so then we have a twinity. And then, of course, how are these unities and twinities created? And so in book number 3, The Origin of the Universe, sees how the one can be divided into the two. And so in a simple term, you see how the one expires for the benefit of the other two. But that is not necessarily what has to happen. It's just an explanation of how it can happen, because does one have to be completely destroyed to create another one? But what we're saying is you can't create another one, you would create another two. And so for 417 weeks, Rick Crammond and the Universal Council have been bringing us to one planet, one nation, one race for justice and world peace. And it's, kind of strange that something like that would have to happen. There are universal needs with respect to our existence on this planet. Air, water, food, and shelter are among them. Peace and prosperity are there as well. Here we are looking back on our history, which is contentious into how far we can go back, depending on if you're talking about previous civilizations hundreds of thousands of years ago, or just our current calendars, which only go back 1,000 years or so. So, we have to wonder, what is the reality? But what we've told, of course, is how important the gravitational aspect is. Understanding the angular density, understanding that we've been told that we're fallen angels because we're falling through weakness. And in that process, we increase our density, and there's an increased pressure that's reflected in the increased gravity. And of course, that's an increased dependence on Earth space feeding. But there's the internal pressure of the Gans field, which is counterbalancing. And so we also have a law where the angular momentum is conserved. So you cannot destroy anything, so you can only change its nature. So confrontation is the result, because that duality invites duals. And that energy which manifests could manifest as a friction. And of course, if we look at our hands and how they come together, if we clench the fists, well, that could manifest into fighting. And that's why they say, you have to be gentlemanly. You have to shake hands, but come out fighting. And that's just a misconception of the inertia density manifestation that we have to go through as part of the entertainment. And so the entertainment is very entertaining, and I recognize that. And, there's nothing wrong with that, is there? Except that when that entertainment becomes life-threatening, and then we look at, to understand our existence, we're told via commandments what we need to think about, what we need to understand. And if the first commandment is, I am the Lord your God, that speaks of an intermediary. So we can't speak directly to the source. And then, of course, number 11, which is beyond the original 10 commandments, which I grew up with, is another 14 for a complete pack case of 24. Thou shalt not lie. Well, going back to line number 1, I am the Lord your God. So this contradiction is something that we've been living with for so long, and we accept it as an important energy binding fact. Energy binding is important for our self-serving needs. That's the dimension point as we come together, me, myself, and I, the 3 dimensions, and we come together with the plasma science. But do we have to do it at the expense of others in the conventional physical science, where we lie, cheat, steal, and kill to preserve ourselves, and then we get surprised when other people are having the same kind of issues, and they either have to confront you, or they have to steal from someone else, or they just suffer in their silence and solitude. So we are deficient in our vitality. And so we're looking for enhancement in our vitality through the plasma science, because many of us are in our activities just louche leakers. And louche is our vitality. And it's something that a lot of people like to steal from us because they are unable to remember how they originally got it. So we are in the position now where we can deliver serious enhancement. We can do it on the regular way, or we can do it on the super way as a superconductor. Either way, we have an understanding now of the susceptibility in singularity. How do we look at the GaN's powder as we did in Beijing? And how do we convert that to gold? Because it involved a gravitational completion. And that came about by an external input of the GaN's field of humanity. Yes, we are the external input. And so that changed the whole process where we had the GaN's powder and we turned it into gold. And that's the susceptibility in duality. But we're talking about the PICO state. And so when we see the PM ticks, how they come together and navigate from all corners of the universe. And it's interesting to say all corners of the universe when we look at the galaxies and how round they are. But they seem to be round and flat. They seem to all rotate on the same field. And it's interesting that they don't really appear as spherical as they should be, because we're seeing the product of the interaction of these fields. These are called the inertia fields. So these PM ticks squeeze together, come together magnetically, and then manifest gravitationally. And because energy cannot stop, energy cannot be grabbed onto. Energy can only be corralled within a field. And so it requires a pattern. And so to determine that strength, we have to look at the path link and susceptibility and how we can navigate the various levels that we have. And so there's a range between the magnetical and the gravitational, and that's in one direction. But then we have the magnetical and the gravitational in another direction on the left, and the gravitational magnetical on the right. And so we have the two dimensions, up and down and from left to right. And we can navigate from one to another by changing the strength. And so when we start at the basic and we look at the nature of the pico star and how it manifests into a pico planet like Saturn. And what's interesting is, although the Saturn is that rotating field, at the North Pole, it exhibits a hexagonal opening. How do you get from a round field to a hexagonal opening? There has to be some kind of overlapping of energy, isn't there? So that we go from the singularity to not only the duality, but beyond. And so that becomes the transaction zone, because the singularity requires a solo effort, but the duality requires a partnership. But the true partnership requires reciprocity. In other words, a balance of incentives. And a balance of incentives is mutually beneficial. And so we see in the creation of these PM ticks and how they manifest into carbonic acid. And isn't it interesting that we see this equidistant bonding? And say, well, gee, is that symmetry or is that a reflection? How did it manifest that way? What is this carbonic acid? Well, this is a molecule that rapidly converts to water and carbon dioxide in the presence of water. So the interconversion of carbon dioxide and carbonic acid is related to the breathing process of all aerobic organisms and to the acidification of natural waters. So action and reaction. So the plasma rule is the higher strength feeds the weaker strength. So how does that compare with the physical rule where the higher strength beats the weaker strength? The higher strength eats the weaker strength, or even the higher strength bombs the weaker strength. So that becomes the transaction zone, becomes a point of conflict, a binding zone. When these two fields come together, they come together in the density and they manifest together. That is an inertia density manifestation zone. So when we look at the nanocoding as we did before, and we saw the nanocharges, what we had to understand is that they facilitate a charge and a discharge. There's no such thing as a negative charge. There's a negative charge direction because that charge is either charging or discharging, and it can be stacked up in layers, and they can be aligned as a nanotube. And so in that way, they create a pattern and a replication. And so that's a nano alignment that we see when we nanocode the copper wire. But how does the copper wire become carbon nanocrystals? And these carbon nanocrystals are diamonds, and they facilitate a monatomic alignment, and they turn into a superconductor. And then we find this way, this nanolayer stacking, it can be aligned as a nanotube, or the diamond structures themselves can close the tubes. And so we have interstitial binding or nesting. So the nanomonatomic layers, layer on layer and layer, 40,000 layers of nanocoding, at least. It's a conservative estimate. But is that the maximum? And does it matter? It matters in terms of field strength. But what matters the most are the nano gaps, because they're created in between these layers. So what happens in that result? Well, we create the basis of a star formation, which we call a tetrahedron. So when you take your first two fingers and you put them towards each other and take one hand and rotate it 90 degrees, you see how you can create the image of the star formation with the tips of your fingers. And that's what is going on when you do the layer star stacking. And they stack and they stay together. Well, how does that happen? Well, that's because there is an intermediary, a connector intermediary. And based on its strength, it can be covalent, trivalent, tetravalent, in all cases, a bonding. So to understand this star state, we see that the nanostate monatomic star formations have a relationship between the lower layer, in this case, the black circles, and the upper layer, in this case, being the blue circles. So in one connection of intermediaries, we see three black circles with one blue. And then in another, we see the three blue circles with one black as a complete inversion. So looking at it from the side point, we see this synergy develop with this monatomic energy flow. And as one state flips over to another state. But as we know in the new math, that 1 + 1 + 1 is more than 3, because we believe in the sacrifice. Well, there's nothing to sacrifice. There's only creation. You create one or you create the other. And then you can do this at room temperature and create a superconductor at room temperature. And you keep adding these stars together. And more than 3 in a chain is scientifically a polymer. But when they fold over and create the star formation initially, there's a base that's gravitational, 3 in the base, and 1 is magnetical. And then that base gathers strength and continues to gather and form this inertia density manifestation of matter, dark matter, and antimatter. Inertia density manifestation does not dictate whether or not it stays in the plasma state or in the physical state, because every inertia density manifestation is a step down in energy containment. So at what point does it go from the plasma state to the physical state? Well, we try the reverse process where we take the rotating balls, which are physical, and we see that there's a plasma field that emanates from each ball. But when we put them all together in the star formation, they all interact. So this is what we saw when we put the rotating balls together in Beijing, and you see that star formation is all in the tables that are all the same height. So it's only a one plane, kind of like the galaxy, kind of like the solar system. And now, instead of one rotating ball, we have two rotating balls in each one. And it's nice to put out all those silver spoons to try and catch all this gold that is falling from the sky. And you wonder how we're going to catch all that gold in those spoons. I don't know. But the thing is, each dynamic reactor created a plasma field. And at that core, that is a positive energy. That is a gravitational conformation. And that's the point. That is the initial dimension building point. And that's where we come in the singularity. But when we add a second, we only have to connect one. And then we have two with that connection. So when I have to understand what that connection means in terms of charge, because based on the surface to volume ratios, which I've been haranguing on for so many years, but that's the way I was taught. And the reason for that is because I needed clarity. I needed some kind of security in understanding the science. And you need to understand the charge. So clearly, the ends of a straight line have a smaller surface to volume ratio, and the smaller one has a higher negative charge. And so the connection has to be positive. And then if you put a bend in that line, again, you've reduced the surface to volume ratio, which increased the negative charge. And then to balance that off, you had to create another positive charge. So along one dimension, you have positive connected by two negatives. And along the second dimension, you have hydrogen connected to an oxygen. And that is the fundamental way things operate, but things don't all go in straight lines. Look at a banana, for instance. It has a curvature. So based on this description, you can now identify the energy transmission through the banana. The two ends are negative, and the curvature is also negative. But inside the radius of the curvature is positive. So then when we look at the Magrav condition of the positive and negative charge, how the hydrogen and oxygen comes together, and we see that it continues where we increase the field strength and how all these come together to balance everything out. At that inflection point, we create more hydrogen and we create more oxygen. And at that point in time, well, we create water because water comes together in an energy parceling unit of H2O, and it is around Magrav. So right away, we start to realize there's a problem here because the hydrogen only has a field strength of 1, and the oxygen has a field strength of 8, and we only have the two hydrogens to balance it out. Well, how do you end up with a round water molecule? And then what happens when you remove that one hydrogen? It's a positive. It's looking to go somewhere, which means what's left behind is a negative. And that means it is looking for supplementation. And that's the hydroxyl that is looking forward to that. And so on that basic principle, we understand how fatty acids, which is the advancement of the basic amino acid, and we see the saturated form, sure, we're balanced off with the carbon and the two hydrogen on the upside and the downside, but on the left to right, there's a definite difference between the water-soluble side and the oil-soluble side. And so based on surface to volume ratio, you can see that it goes from the left to the right here, with the right being magnetical. So that's the point. What happens with the alpha-linolenic acid is that when it bends, it creates this charge across this other dimension. So that straight omega 3, 6, and 9 bends at that third, sixth, and ninth point. And that is the point. So we have a convergence of oxygen coming in the center, and that becomes highly gravitational. So each negative charge is highly magnetical as a result. And so that's how we create the water. And in that process, once it's created and released, then the fatty acid restores itself to its straight format, where it has the gravitational on one side, the magnetical on the other side. So it is now primed to work and repeat the process. And so it bends again, and we create more water and more water. And so in that process, as we create the water, we create the protein. That is the counterbalance. So from the amino acids, we migrate through DNA, through the fatty acids, to the creation of protein, which takes us from that simple and unstable state and makes it very stable through its complexity. And that complexity begins with cells and then more complex cells. So the protein is formed from the amino acids, which are the building blocks. 3 amino acids are the foundation, but the fourth cannot be supported. That's why it causes a folding over. The fourth amino acid folds over to make protein, and the byproduct is water in that process. So then we see how the cells are formed. So there has to be a communication that comes from the outside to the inside, as we see the phospholipids line up to create the barrier of the cell. So that cellular communication is ongoing. If that communication fails, then problems begin. And then other cells form through the same method of communication. And so there is an intracellular communication, so from the outside to the inside, and there's an intercellular communication from one cell to the other cell. So the intracellular communication would be like book number 1, and the intercellular communication would be like book number 2. And so many times you've heard the phrase, I made man in the image of myself. And so this is what happens. One creates the other. So that becomes the question. And what happens if we start to flip? Is it symmetry or is it reflection? Well, clearly, if we flip the bend where the bend was at the top, now the bend is at the bottom, are we reversing the process or are we adding to the process? So clearly, even though we flip the process, it still becomes a relationship of hydrogen to oxygen. So is it symmetry or is it a reflection? Becomes the overriding question. And what happens when we introduce a third field as the basis of the star formation? Is that symmetry or is that reflection? And which way is up and which way is down, or which way is left and which way is right? And oh my God, how do you keep track of all this? And then, of course, when we look at our brain, and thank God it's well organized because it's bringing together those 3 fields of the copper GANs, the zinc GANs, and the carbogen GANs, and coming together, we see the manifestation of the pituitary. So the left side of the brain and the right side of the brain are symmetrical. Or are they a reflection of each other? And which way is up? Well, for most of us, we walk on the ground, not on the ceiling. So we understand which way is gravitational. So if we look at a rainbow reflection like this, we know that this is not normal. How can we be so sure? Well, if you look at the pattern and you see that the red, which has a lower frequency, and the blue, which has a higher frequency, determine their position. The red is on the outside of the arc, and the blue is on the inside of the arc. And so when you look at the reflection, the same is true. That is impossible. That is unnatural. When you look at the symmetry, the outside arc will be red on the inside and blue on the outside. That would be a reflection. And then the part in the middle is the part that is at the watershed point of that reflection. That creates the peace dome that allows you to stay within it or to stay without it. Because I made man in the image of myself. That's the statement we keep hearing. And so, is it symmetry or is it a reflection? So what's interesting here is when you look at the skeleton of the human or the body of the human, the point here is that there's a left side and a right side. And if you turn around 180 degrees, there's still a right side and a left side. But if you turn sideways, there is a front and there is a back. They are not symmetrical. And the head is at the top and the feet are at the bottom. And that clearly is not symmetrical. So we can say that the head to toe relationship is not symmetrical. And the left to the right is a reflection because it is symmetrical. In other words, if we were to only look in singularity and just look at ourselves as just being right-handed, no left hand exists, and we turn around 180 degrees, it would be the same. But on the side view, there's a front and a back. Which side are you missing? Are you missing the left side or the right side? And that becomes the point. Sounds strange? It is strange. When we talked about the tic-tac-toe, we were only given two options, X's and O's. Based on surface to volume ratios, the X's are at the corners and the O's are in between. So the X's are negative, the O's are positive. And then we tried to figure out whose turn it was. But then we see all the diamonds that were created through the nanocoating, and they point in all different directions. And two most important ones, the transmission, one dimension, transition, another dimension, and they were balanced. So was that symmetry or was that a reflection? But when we remove one, and it only takes one, now we create a direction. So from left to right, we have a balance in the transmission. But in the transition, there's definitely one side is magnetical and the other side is gravitational. because there's a lot of energy flow in one and a lot of energy containment in the other. So there is no reflection. So to understand these curves, because life is not in straight lines, we sometimes slip up like on a banana peel. But we have to understand that when we look at a banana and how does it apply scientifically, the endpoints are negative and the curvature is negative. So within that structure, you have created the banana. That is your gravitational conformation. So it follows an inertia density manifestation field. And then if you have a reflection, then the question becomes, is it symmetrical or is it a reflection? Change the question. Is it in singularity or is it in duality? Because obviously they are opposite. So it's two bananas, two fields. And when you get these two fields together, you create an inertia density manifestation. And as such, you bring together three fields: transmission, transition, and transmutation. And they have different flavors. And then there's energy that's flowing all around. So you have a balance, don't you, between these fields? And it seems that nothing is happening because they're in equilibrium. They're in a stasis point. But that's clearly impossible. There has to be a difference in one or the other, because otherwise you would know which one is which. So when we continue our dimension building and we add a third and we connect two and we add a fourth and connect three to complete that star formation, and then we end up with two fields where we continue this dimension inertia building, and you have the two star formations coming together and they create this inertia density manifestation of that point. And that point itself then can be added and connected also to provide two fields. So then we have this progression. But of course, life doesn't just go in straight lines, but it can be modified by external influences. And so now we have another field that is coming across. However, it can be modified as an explosion, as a bomb going off, and separate. But does it have to have that big bang? Or can we continue the dimension inertia building by bringing 2 points together on each point, as we did in Beijing, of that star formation? So we can modify that inertia, the star points, which are each from two fields, and modify them through decoupling, stretching, compressing, squeezing, or deforming. And so when we look at the structure of the phospholipids and what creates that field, you have the hydrophobic tails and the hydrophilic heads, but you have one as a reflection of the other. But they're not the same, are they? They're two separate fields overlapping, and one contains the outside, one contains the inside, and the center point is that transition field. And so this is how we have the polyatomic solid Gans inertia because there is no physical bonding, it's a covalent bonding. And so if you're tail to tail, then that becomes connected through the magnetical forces. But if you're working together as a dynamic plasma construction, then these forces all work together and create that fifth plasma field in the center, and that becomes that point. And so from that point, you can either add to, as we did in eradicating the virus with the 1 cup, or you can deplete, as we did in the 2nd cup. So what that means is you convert or you deplete. And that's not destruction, that's deconstruction. And that's all done by counterweights. So the counterweight measures, as we understand them, there's a physical state, which we measure by weight, and there's an atomic state, which we measure by mass, and then that becomes the gravitational component of the counterweight measure. But in the nuclear state, there's a weight measured by Tesla, and the plasma state measured by time, and that's the magnetical component. And so the magnetical and the gravitational components have to come together. And then what you find is that nuclear feeding inertia continues even to the fragments. If you break all that up, you still maintain that gravitational stability because that dimensional portability exists on each and every dimension point. And each one has the attributes of 1 + 1 + 1 is more than 3, because each of those feeding points continues. They don't get sacrificed. So each of those points are like fragments, and these fragments give you a clue whether or not that energy is converging or diverging. And so that becomes your first part as we, as detectives, trying to figure out how things work. And then we see that interaction continues, and we see that the convergence is gravitational, but the divergence is magnetical. And so we create by common denominator. These commonalities are the clues that tell you what is embedded in that transmission, because the transmission is an alternating frequency of magnetical and gravitational interactions of field forces. And so the embedded transmission rides that. And that is the plasma matter dilemma, you see, because the atomic state, the nanostate, and the GAN state are higher energy states than the states that we usually work in our physicality, but they are all still part of the physical matter state. But they are a product based on a plasma state. And so that is the plasma matter dilemma. We see these 3 states in 3 dimensions, not understanding that there's a 4th one that supports it. And that 4th one supports it on each and every state. It's because these are all overlapping fields. And they maintain their equilibrium. So that equal sign is actually the gravitational positive sign. And the ends are the negative sign. That is part of the transmission on each and every state. But then we have the transition from one state to the other state, and there has to be a connection to all of these positive things that come together. And that would be the negative connection. But if one has a negative and the other has a negative, and 2 poles that are similar repel, this matter energy transfer state then becomes that gravitational conveyance, that embedded point. So we see how these points come together and create this inflection point. As we say, each point then, as we described before, the negatives are connected by the positive in one dimension and another dimension. So it seems like we are in this 2-dimensional reconstruction. And so the first level that we understand is the creation of water. But it's also the same way that we created the galaxies. And so we see how these things come together in a rotating field, and then it becomes highly gravitational by squeezing all these PM ticks together. And each of these PM ticks also have this magnetical component, but they themselves are magravs, which mean that they have a magnetical and gravitational component. And each of them is a product of the cosmic rays, and they become another manifestation, which eventually evolves into the galaxies, of which we are a part of that. And so each one is a kind of reconstruction, beginning with the negative hydrogen and the positive oxygen, which is the essential fingerprint of our Earth space. And then at that core, we have that PICO star. And then we see the structure of the Saturn and how a mid-19th century scientist named Edward Roche, trying to explain the structure of Saturn's rings and moons, he made a calculation called the Roche limit. And he examined the effects of strong gravitational fields upon swarms of tiny particles. But he's most famous for his theory that the planetary rings of Saturn were formed when a large icy moon came too close to Saturn and was pulled apart by gravitational forces. Think about that for a moment. Pulled apart by gravitational forces. And he described a method of calculating the distance at which an object held together only by gravity would break up due to tidal forces. The distance became known as the Roche limit. Let me repeat. They were pulled apart by gravitational forces. So the conservation of the plasmagen state dependency is actually a two-way street. It has to be balanced between the magnetical gravitational force fields, and that's in the transmission between one side and the other. But then we can transition magnetically and gravitationally between state to state. So it involves a substitution, which is the transference of gravitational dominance at that point of substitution, where the intensity equals zero and the outtensity equals zero, the gravitational conformation remains, or the gravitational conformation will dissolve. And that's where something can be something as opposed to being something else. So what is determining that? It's the emission of intention. This is the field dynamic beyond your aura plasma interaction. So the launch point of one field becomes the target point of the other field, and the launch point of the other field becomes the target point of the first field. And this is going back, and it's constantly going back, and the poles are constantly flipping. So these cosmic rays, they keep coming, and they keep coming into a gravitational conformation. And at that core are the picotech, the pico stars. Within that cell boundary, that cellular structure that is manifest as a physical inertia density manifestation, which we call a cell. And then we have that nucleus, which is the gravitational conformation of that. And so it too is fed, as we understand the cellular nuclear PM ticks coming from the outside to the inside. And then we see how we can migrate with the GANs of the soul and incorporate the cups of life and how they can create a cup of life product. In other words, take 2 cups of emotion and create the GANs of emotion, 2 cups of physicality, create the GANs of physicality, interact the cup of emotion with the cup of physicality, then you get your transaction zone at that PICO core. And that's what we are. We are a gravitational entity traveling in the magnetical field. And so when we look at our universal cup, and the head is up, the feet are on the ground. And the field strength of the head is stronger. The stronger field feeds the weaker. So the dynamic transfer state from the universal cup comes to that physical destination state of our feet. But then when we look at what is the energy, and we find that the extremities, the top of the head, the tips of the toes, the tips of the finger, they are negative. And then we look at the head, obviously it's positive. We look at the spine, obviously it's positive. We're only looking at two directions. So when we bring our hands together, the left hand facing the right hand, since they are the tips of our physicality, they are negative. And so when we bring them together and when they touch, it has to overcome the field strength of the repulsion. That becomes very positive. But as you spread your arms out, that repulsion gets stronger, which means that that positive field also gets stronger, which means that in between our hands is that positive field. So the left hand is still negative and the right hand is still negative, and the DNA in their fingers are the same. So how can the same DNA give you a different conformity, a reflection, or a symmetry? The DNA is not the factor. Well, what happens if you make a mirror image of your two hands? Take your right hand and put it on a mirror. You will create a left hand in the mirror. I made man in the image of myself. That is your gravitational confirmation. So then you can understand the dilemma with Aphrodite, the ancient Greek goddess of love, beauty, passion, and procreation. This is the day after Valentine's. Know of her central role in myths, like the Trojan War and her birth from sea foam. A member of the 12 Olympians, she was often associated with Venus in Roman mythology. She was considered a powerful, sometimes capricious force, often accompanied by her son, Eros. Is it real, or is it just a reflection? So when we look at the carbon inertia highways and we understand we have those three dimensions, each of them is an inertia point that is supported by a plasma field in the background. And that plasma field in the background is an inertia density manifestation as well. And it is supported by another field in the background. And so you have all of these inertia fields coming together in twinity, and each of them facilitates a rotation. So you have multiple turning points. And they all maintain this equilibrium, and they're fed by this cosmic rays. And so it's not just in singularity, they're not in solo, but they work together. And so each of them has a relationship as a magnetical gravitational. And there has to be a consistency. There has to be a gravitational core. And then when you create one, then you create another, and you make man in the image of yourself, where you have this creation of the free plasma of the one star formation, which is one transaction zone, and the star formation of another transaction zone, and the two get connected together into that squeezy and that plasma state, which we call the PICO core, that gravitational confirmation of the creation of life, that structure within the structure, the coming together of the carbon, oxygen, hydrogen, and the nitrogen. So when you look at twin curves that are opposite, is that symmetry or is that a reflection? Neither. It is two separate fields. So when we look at Earth's target ranges, we see that the moon space has a magnetical boundary and the Earth space has a magnetical boundary, two separate targets. And there are transition ranges. So we have the magma or the Earth brain and the crust. This is our biosphere, which is a transition from the SiO2, the silicon dioxide, or the H2O, the hydrogen dioxide, or the dihydrogen oxide, excuse me, the biosphere range. That's what's sitting on the crust. And that crust is in between the atmosphere, and the atmosphere is between the magnetosphere and the crust is above the magma. So coming from the core, going from the magma to the biosphere, to the atmosphere, to the magnetosphere, this is all based on density. The density that we are familiar with is the gravitational conformation. And so this is how we rate our dimension in two dimensions. The transmission ranges where we go from range to range, or the transition ranges when we go from the atmosphere to the below the ground. In either case, they are part of that dimension that we understand. So as we go across these ranges, each range being a watershed, are we only looking at half the picture? When you look in the mirror, you see your left hand and your right hand, and they are symmetrical. And you look at your face and you see your face, but your face is different from your back. And not only that, but your head is still up and your feet are still down. So how come the reflection only goes from left to right and doesn't go from top to bottom or front to back? There's always a magnetical consistency. It's based on the inertia density manifestation of the gravitational field forces. And there's always a gravitational consistency because gravity seeks density. And so the solid gas is what accelerates this angular momentum. You don't have to be a fallen angel to understand that. As one plasma feeds another plasma, there's a relationship where one is magnetical and one is gravitational. And the interaction is the transaction zone. And then that core, we have that GANS. But that came from a soul vision. That soul vision was part of the construction. And that vision is an unconditional truth, a pure plasma straight. And we can see the manifestation of this vision in the symmetry of the architecture. A man-made construct, isn't it? So when we're looking at our construct, we have to discriminate. We have to select our personal star of physicality. And we have chosen the soul of the physicality of our sun. Well, do you choose after you arrive or do you choose before? So it must be a pre-selection process where the soul of physicality of the stars of the universe are also part of that process. And the sun is shielding us on many levels, giving us what we need, that gravitational confirmation of oxygen. That is the one, the emission of light that crosses that threshold, that non-visible gas that shows us how we do that plasmatic decay to GANs, or GANs decay from gas to liquid to solid. And that magnetical emission becomes manifest in colors, a fingerprint that shows the emission spectrum of the oxygen, so that we can see that gravitational tracking system. And we find that we need a supplementation due to consumption based on an acquired knowledge of a conditional teaching by ancient teachers. We need the unconditional teaching by the Creator because we're short about 20% in terms of our loosh. We need a new awareness which crosses that historical threshold between the cosmic feeding and the loosh harvesting, don't we? We're into uncharted territory. We are part of that herd at that turning point. There are many stars beyond the nanomonatomic state, covering the range from decay to radiation. We are the AI, that ancestral intelligence. We are the technology. We are the inertia product. We are the image of our dimensional convergence point. So when we're looking at energy, we see that it is portable. It can transition by way of elevation, where the physical matter state elevates to the energy state, or by inertia, where the energy state transitions to the physical matter state. So when we talk about elevation, that involves expansion. And we see the confirmation of the manifestation of the three eye and how it affects our third eye and our understanding. So we have been trying for 629 weeks to teach the Knowledge Seekers workshops so that all of us can come to that greater oneness and suddenly transcend the limitations of the nuclear science. Because there are no limitations. The cosmic ray transmissions continue. And so we can become part of that. And every month we enjoy a session, and you're welcome to join that. This Saturday, yesterday, we enjoyed a special cosmic ray transmission, Valentine's Day special. And so we understand that the Keshe Foundation is establishing research teams because we are in the post-May the 10th, 2025 era where the truth is coming out. We can turn diamonds to gold or silver. That is the PICO core of truth. And so we understand in better terms that energy reflection. It's bigger than big business and bigger than big garbage. In that reflection, there's a covalent bond. And that's how we know which way is up. And as we're facilitating a scientific rescue, one nation network at a time, we're opening up the blinds. That time is now, and we're seeing the truth, the reality. Our mission is to bring peace on earth and join humanity with the universal community. We want to bring man as equal to all beings in the universe by teaching the plasma science and technology equally to everyone, that no one is left out and no one is abused due to lack of knowledge. So help us achieve this goal. We are transferring the energy of the PICO star at the nano level, at the PICO level, and beyond, and breaking it out into that GANS freakout we call the GANS popcorn, where you have the gas in the center and it facilitates a GANS explosion of many points. And that's what we call the Big Bang. But all of us who were creating the GANS, we weren't hurt in that process. There was no loud bang. it's time to understand that there's a new plasmagen travel agency. We were born to Earth because we were soul travelers. So we don't need the Big Bang theory to tell us how things work. So please check your bags. We were born for a reason as universal functionaries. So please proceed to the departure lounge. Flight 2026 is now boarding, and so please have a nice trip. This is the Keshe Foundation Spaceship Institute Teachings on Plasma Science, welcoming all the beautiful plasma travelers of the carbon nations, learning about the new selection process of the new organic plasma science. There's a World Peace Treaty. Choose it, sign it unconditionally, mean it sincerely, because the point of the pure, true picotech is the polyatomic core manifestation. The overlapping fields of Earth space create that peace dome. Is the inertia of the present governed by dimensions of history, or is it time to learn the history of ourselves in a universal context? The PICO state promotes the GANs as a peaceful superconductor. That scientific bang is the PICO to GANs explosion, ranging the matter, plasma, and universal states. The plasma science is enhanced daily via the Peace Dome in a practical exchange for peace on Earth. So welcome to the new golden outer space age. I hope you enjoyed this lesson, and it brings us to the end of the basic Picotech series. So thank you all for listening.
Well, thank you for presenting, Alex. And as we know, there's this full emotion of creation. Apparently, it's much, much simpler than we've ever thought. I know he mentioned we need to understand this full emotion. The AI would never, or the machines would never achieve it, but it's much simpler than we thought it was. So thank you for delivering, but there's quite a bit to become a master. And this is just the basic series that you're concluding. Let's see if any of the participants have any questions or something they'd like to bring up or take exception with. I don't know, Ike, your camera came on, be careful.
Yeah, sorry, that's my fat thumb.
Problem.
Yeah, Alex, I got a question. That initial, what you put out, the nano coating layers up to 40, 50,000, how do you compare that to the field strength?
More is more, less is less. So numerically, overlapping fields will compound. And 1 and 1 is more than 2. 1 plus 1 plus 1 is more than 3, because they continue in operation. So what you're doing is enlisting the services of each and every layer to contribute. So you're increasing the gravitational density. The gravitational density is inherent. It's our understanding of the gravitational density that is the core of the problem. We have been measuring our field strength based on the explosive nature of our existence. So the feeding aspect or the killing aspect seems to be an inherent part of our species. But we have to understand that our species and its interaction here is with our Earth space. So this is an acquired action. And because we're all victims and also participants that field strength is increasing, just like the GANs.
Right. Thank you.
All right, any other thoughts or questions anyone would like to share? And I think there's many different ways that this knowledge is starting to come in. They said that Steven Spielberg is going to release a movie. The trailer has already gotten 30 or 40 million views. I think it's called Disclosure Day. So, and then, as I mentioned previously about Elon Musk April Fool's announcement, where he said this was not the frosting on the cake, but the cherry on the cake. And then Mr. Kesh has often talked about Tesla and so on and so forth, and how we could take the sort of the carcass of the car and retrofit it with some plasma. And now Mr. Kesh is saying to automotive dealers something about some technology that'll be introduced maybe late 26 or part of 27. So I think something could be cooking in the background where we may see for the first time a hovering car. And this will be, again, beyond the imagination of the man that this could be possible, but it'll certainly create a lot of excitement if that's the way. But he's been mentioning Tesla, and he's now mentioned automotive dealers. Does anyone have any thoughts on this?
Well, didn't he have a deal signed with GM around 20,000, 2010, 2011? And the King of Belgium stopped all that?
Yes.
So if he had that in 2011, imagine what he has in 2026.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
And Tesla just released a Hoover bike, like a big skateboard in Dubai a few days ago.
You mean it hovers? It actually?
Yep, it actually hovers.
Okay. So again, maybe we're taking the first steps to overcome gravity. As Mr. Kesh said, he's looking for experts in the field of lift and motion, and also the transfer of energy. Again, similar to what Tesla did, but going beyond that. So I think a lot of things are getting set up. And again, I'm not really deeply involved in delivering. I'm more interested in understanding the ethos so much more than the knowledge. At this point, anyway. As I was saying earlier, the knowledge without the ethos is rather futile in the longer run. Maybe in the short run, it'll get you somewhere, but it won't apparently last without this understanding the ethos, which, of course, is embedded in the game, as Mr. Kesh indicated. The more you play, the more the ethos of the foundation sinks in. And we put that in the chat as well as a number of other offerings from the Plasma Times. You can see there's a number of publications, many articles, which are interesting to explore if you're one of those types who are exploring different knowledge. So the Plasma Times is a perfect, I think it stopped in maybe 2019, I'm not sure, but it didn't continue on. But there's a lot of beautiful articles that need to be understood and opened up in there. So okay, any other thoughts, comments, questions? We want to thank the Spanish team for dropping in. Unexpected pleasure, but thank you again, and we will try a reciprocation. I guess your meetings have gone to Sundays, is that right? Or are you still having 2 meetings a week? Are there any spokesmen here that'd like to tell us where we can?
Hello.
Yes?
No, we were just meeting in for some experiments.
Oh, okay.
It is not the weekly meeting. There are 2 weekly meetings.
Okay.
On Mondays and Wednesdays.
Okay, do you want to put in anything into the chat that would allow people, or if they have, is the meeting in English and Spanish, or I know most of you are? Yeah.
It's only Spanish.
Okay, but it's the
But if somebody comes in
Mhm.
that speaks English, we can translate.
Yes, I've been there and you've accommodated me as well. So thank you to the
Yes.
Spanish.
So you're all welcome.
Yes, yes.
Yes. And I want to thank you for all that you do for us. And Alex also, because they are very good lessons, very easy to understand. And all the people who contribute for these meetings.
Yeah, it's
And of course, to Mr. Keshe
yes, that's what
for
he's.
giving us this beautiful knowledge.
It's not one anymore. It's all of us. So we're all participating in a way, in whatever way you choose to participate. But I think we're going to grow into it as well, Alenka. It was nice hearing from you and nice to see Lily
Oh,
and some of the other.
I'm glad to be here also.
Yes, yes, anytime.
And I hope that if we have some more Spanish speaking attendants here, I will be able to translate to them, at least the lessons.
We appreciate that. That's a valuable function.
Thank you.
I know Rick has been pleased with that. So thank you for all your service to the community, all of us. In a way.
And I have a question also. Is this a new set of lessons with a new theme? Because what I heard is something new, not new to the knowledge, but as if it is a new set of lessons
Maybe
with new themes.
Alex, would you want to cover your thinking on these, the way you're constructing sort of a program for us in teaching?
Yes, of course. Thank you. When you add the knowledge, it obviously changes your perspective. And as I said before, in terms of terminology, it's always based on our old understanding, and we try and bridge it to the new understanding, but using the old words, it's very difficult.
Yes,
But once we
yes.
introduce the new words, we introduce a new image, and then it expands our fields of reference. So,
So this is a new set of teachings then.
well, what I'm trying to do is to make that connection so that the new knowledge seekers, which are still in the majority,
Yes,
don't get, shall we say, swamped with a lot of information in a short period of time. But you know, for instance, I've had the benefit of several decades of knowing this,
yes,
but
yes,
my knowledge, say 30 years ago, and my knowledge today is enhanced. It's totally different.
yes, that's right.
And really, what I've tried to demonstrate today is that when you ignore this cosmic ray equilibrium, you're only seeing half the picture. So when we
Yes,
look in the mirror, we can see that we can have a reflection of our hands, and we can create our own image. But when we look in the mirror, we are seeing our face. So
yes.
that means our body is positive, our back is negative, because when you
Mhm.
extend your hands are negative. Those negative hands have to be connected positively. And because they bend, you can go through the whole range. You can have your arms extended as wide as possible, or you can have them come together, or you can have them in any position in between, but they don't have to be symmetrical. You can bend one arm and extend the other arm. And so all of
Yes,
that is determined by the field strength between the positive negative charge on one side and the positive negative charge on the other side. But when you look in the
I,
mirror, those images are reflected. But if you turn around, you can't see the mirror, but the mirror will see your back.
Mhm.
And so
Yes,
the process of looking in the mirror with your back to your back is the same as you look at from your front to your front. But the thing is that the hands are a mirror image. Why does the mirror reflect the image left to right, but does not reflect it top to bottom? And,
that's right.
but when you create a photograph, if you look at the original cameras, the image that came in was embedded into an image plate, and the image itself was upside down, which means it was not only left to right, but it was top to bottom. But
Yes,
it was
that's right.
still front to front, not front to back. So
Mhm.
we still see what I'm saying is the transmission and the transition, but we didn't see the transmutation because we're only looking at the product of the two fields. We're not looking at the fields that support that. And this is where we're going. So when we discuss the intermediate picotech, we'll be elaborating on that discussion as well. We are trying to elaborate on the basic principle that Mr. Cash has said. We are feedback dominant. In other words, what we're seeing
Mhm.
in the mirror is the feedback of ourselves,
That's right.
but we're not.
I would like to translate because this is an enhancement, a perspective with that enhances your understanding of the fields. And I would like to translate it into Spanish so that we can share it with the Spanish group.
Well, that would be totally wonderful. I have a project now with a German team. A person has come forward to begin translating into German. And so what we've been doing is we've been taking the automated translation and running it through a real person who understands the context of the language,
Yeah.
right?
And also to make corrections because those that
Exactly.
are made digitally are not the same all the time. Are not correct all the time.
That's right.
Always.
And I'm not
Mhm.
capable of doing that. So I would be happy to help in that regard. I know Lisbeth from Colombia has been working very hard in that insofar as she's been taking them and with the assistance of some software programs been translating it
Oh,
into
she is already.
Spanish.
She's doing that already. Oh, that's
Yeah,
great.
yes, she is, and she's posting it up on YouTube, which is very good because it has nothing to do with me. So,
Uh-huh.
and I want to keep it that way.
Is she
Yes.
just putting the English clip up? So there may be still potential for you, Alenka. I don't think she's translating it into Spanish, but Ed did say that the video, well, like you said, Alenka, it's not always correct. But if your video is under,
Yes.
apparently Google will translate it in
Uh-huh.
different languages at your choice right now.
That's
I have tried. Yeah, I have tried to do that in some other videos, but it is for me. It is more difficult for me to do that because I have to go to a specific place, and it takes me more time than just doing the translation.
well, the
Hello,
time is
Alenka.
exactly the point.
Hello,
Yeah, to
hello.
correct. Aló, sí.
Hola, Alenka.
Hola,
Liz,
Lisbeth, ¿qué tal?
¿cómo estás? Bien.
Sí,
Yo acabo de escribir en el grupo Plasma Time. Yo he puesto
sí.
todos los videos de Alex en Plasma
Ajá.
Time. Los pongo con subtítulos. Hay mucha gente en español. que lo leen subtítulos porque me es imposible traducir todo. O sea, los de Alex yo no los he
Ah,
traducido,
ya.
pero están de todos
Ah,
los
bueno.
de 2020. Cada fin de
Todos los
semana.
desde el 2020 están en
Sí,
Plasma Time.
y Plasma Time, ya.
Ajá,
Están en orden
sí.
como él los ha hecho, en las series que él ha entregado, en el orden que él las entregó las
Ah, ya.
series, está todo organizado.
Y, y los de esta clase de hoy, ¿están empezados desde
Hola por
ahorita o hay anteriores de este mismo
todos,
tema?
todos los de
No,
Alex están ahí.
sí, como yo no puedo hacerlo todo desde el 2020 porque no tengo tanto
Sí, no,
tiempo,
es
me gustaría
imposible.
empezar
Con
con
esta
este
clase.
tema porque está muy interesante porque es una nueva perspectiva.
Ok, de hecho, él hizo, I'm sorry everybody because I told to Alenka in Spanish, sorry, for apologize for that. Okay,
English.
one moment. Okay, yo te lo publicaré esta noche o mañana y te lo envío,
Sí,
ok.
perfecto, muy bien,
Voy a
muchísimas
enviarte
gracias.
también. Él hizo una vez una temporada de como resúmenes y te lo voy a enviar para que puedas entrar en esas, que sí podría poder hacer.
Excelente,
Okay.
excelente, sí.
Okay.
Entonces voy a empezar con los de esta serie que está,
Ajá.
no sé si está iniciando ahorita o está iniciando la vez pasada,
No,
porque es
ya
una
llevan
nueva
como
perspectiva.
4. Picotech,
Ya van 4. Okay.
ya van como de Picotech, van como 4 ya. 4 o 5 ya.
Ah, perfecto. Sí, entonces voy a empezar con estos para, ahora bien, esta traducción lo que has hecho es parcial, ¿verdad? No es toda la clase.
No, es solo lo de Alex, yo solo publico lo de Alex, extracto todo lo de Alex cada fin. Ya.
Sí, pero
Sí.
eso que has hecho son digitales las traducciones o tú
No,
las
no,
has
yo las
traducido.
pongo subtituladas. Yo no
Ah,
subtitulo automático. Yo no tengo el tiempo, la verdad, no me alcanza el tiempo.
ok, bien, sí, son subtituladas los videos en inglés
Ya.
y
Sí,
subtítulos en español. Ah,
sí.
perfecto.
Ya,
Bueno,
ya, en
voy a
cualquier
ver
idioma.
estos iniciales, a ver si
De
estoy
hecho, si
preparada con
producen
los
los
términos.
textos, de hecho, si producen los
Ujú,
textos, me los compartes. Espérame un segundo. Me los compartes porque de Hong
sí.
Kong han pedido, pero no los tenemos.
Ah, ya entiendo, hacer la transcripción.
Sí, sí, la haces. Si la haces, no importa si está en español, en texto, porque ellos ya lo traducen automáticamente a su idioma, pero yo no los tengo.
Ah, excelente,
It's
bien.
not a word for me. Yeah. Thank you,
Entonces
Alenka.
puedo hacerlo tipo subtítulos o simplemente como transcripción.
No, digo, si lo escribes en texto, no precisamente en el video, puede ser si lo haces en un texto como tal.
Ah, ok.
Hay un
Ajá. Ah,
documento.
bueno, sí.
Dale,
En
dale.
el formato de texto.
Sí, sí, sí.
Ah, muy
Sorry,
bien. Ok.
I told her about maybe she produced the document and maybe share with us because I told months ago to Alex because the people from, I think it's from Hong Kong, asked to me about the
Ujú,
text from the Alex teachings for translate to the, I don't know, I don't remember if it's Hong Kong or the other people told me. I don't remember now, but
ujú.
it's very interesting for all communities. Thank you. And thank you, Alice, for you all weekly time, like 5 years or more, for give us
Ujú.
your knowledge. Thank you so much. And thank you, everybody.
Yes,
Thank you. Thank you, everybody. Thank you, Alex.
yes,
Thank you, Mark.
yes. We elevate the Spanish group to grow as well. All of us. It's the same knowledge,
Yes,
different language. So thank you for all
that's right.
in the background, no matter how little or how large you're doing, we're all making a contribution. Hopefully, we'll see you the second week of March, second Monday, Alenka, in the
Yes,
very nice.
the,
If you
yes, okay.
now, Randy,
For the testimony, for my testimony. Okay, I will write it down. Okay,
Find you as well. It's
thank you.
usually announced in the American team and the other Canadian team and the student chat and the rest. I copied the link that Randy had put in. Again, I don't know if this is accurate. What do you think, Randy? Is this just another AI contribution or something different?
That's the link I used to join.
Okay. We're going to play this
Okay.
hovering. Can you see it?
Oh. Thank you. Yeah, I'm looking at it.
Okay, let's.
Yes, Facebook.
It's only 15 seconds, so let's see what this link is showing. But Tesla did make an announcement about April 1st with some sort of one of the largest in humanity's ever seen, as I said earlier. So again, although he did use a caveat saying I chose April 1st, just in case it doesn't happen, I can say I played an April Fool's joke on you. But hopefully something big is in the works. He said it would take 12 to 18 months to develop this, whatever he's talking about. But let's see what this 14-second video shows of some sort of a hovercraft. Whoops. Okay, let me see if I can. Oops, we need this stuff. Hopefully I can bring it to the big screen. Is there a sound with this? Okay. We'll see it one more time if it plays a second time. I was thinking he had a big fan. Oh, I'm seeing some dusting up, but maybe not. Okay, well, apparently this is one of the offers. I'm just wondering if he has a fan in there. Everybody seeing this? Does look like it's up.
How high does it go?
I don't know. I know Mr. Kesh said they would keep the hovering car at just a few centimeters off the ground. Of course, if there was snow, it would be a few centimeters above the snow, or if there was an obstacle in the road, it would then be, it would anticipate that and probably be a few centimeters above an object. I don't know how much lift capacity it has to go at what distance, but he said older people would be much more comfortable closer to the ground. But this does, I thought I saw some dust or some air coming out blowing some sand, but it's certainly very minimal if it is such a thing. So I'm not sure if this is a matter state device or something using magnetical gravitational positioning. We'll see. Perhaps this is just an appetizer in a way. Okay, let's go out of that. Okay, and we'll go back to our session. Is there something else someone else would like to bring?
I would just like to thank everybody for allowing me to continue to present. As you see by the cover page, we have always part of the North American series included Canada, US, and the Spanish community into this whole process because this is a worldwide project. And we were just holding up one part of it, and it's thanks to all the members on this panel who made it a worldwide affair. The interest in the translations is peaking or increasing because the gap between the mature knowledge seekers and the new knowledge seekers has become unwieldy. And it is a big load. Mr. Kesh has been broadcasting for over a decade. Mark and I have been working on this project for many years, and we never expected this body of knowledge to grow to the size that it has, and it is becoming very time consuming in order to manage and compile it. And thanks to the new software programs that have come online and our skill has improved, we were able to streamline. But still, we needed people to help. It's not a one-man job, and we can't stop. We have to keep going, because that's what creation is all about. So I want to thank everybody for allowing us to continue to present. And remember, as we discussed, each of us is contributing to the whole. Each of us is a fragment of the whole gravitational context. And I think we're on the verge of dispelling the biggity bangety misinformation that has been dominating our knowledge. And we pride ourselves every new year on having fireworks. And that is not new technology. That is old technology that has been around for thousands of years, and yet we revel in it. So thank you all for allowing me to continue, and thank you for being part of it.
Yes, thank you as well, and thank each and every one of you. We appreciate your presence. We just watched that 14-second video with the hovering, or the little hovercraft sort of, that Randy shared with us. Lisbeth observed, they observed in X, Musk talks about different system and changes in future life, almost repeating what Mr. Kesh says. And yeah, I think there is obviously, Tesla is quite familiar with the Kesh technology, and I understand some of the team listens and tries to decipher these workshops as we're doing as well. So perhaps there's a marriage about to happen, or at least sharing of the technology. And of course, you could consider Elon Musk an artisan in a way, and probably to save his car company with very stiff competition from the Chinese, Mr. Kesh is going to give it a new lease of life, perhaps. I'm just speculating, of course, but he's mentioned Tesla, the hovering car, and I think it would be a great fit. And of course, flabbergasting humanity so much that this technology has been here and is now being introduced. So with Mr. Kesh mentioning about dealers and Kesh logo and the rest, we may see something that we could only imagine could be possible. I want to welcome Elias. Thank you. And thank you for the transcripts and so on. Any other comments, questions, thoughts before I play the final disclaimer in the session with Lance?
I was just wondering on the way that hovercraft looks.
I missed that, Milan. Milan? Could you repeat that?
Oh, I'm sorry. The microphone turned off. I was just looking at that the system, the flying thing. It almost looks like from Back to the Future. Back to the Future seems like better than what they're showing right now, but I'm sure Kesh Foundation is going to be a lot different. So it's like they're going back and forth until they come up with something like something bigger or something unbelievable. So
working on so many different things for energy and other things. Rick is always showing some of the latest developments, but it is, again, quite difficult to bring some of this technology in, but it's being brought in through a different way, as Mr. Kesh said. I don't know exactly the way, but not the way we perhaps expected it to come in. But he did mention dealers and cars, so this would be something very large about to appear on the scene, at least announced by Musk, perhaps in conjunction with the Kesh Foundation. But we don't know. This is just speculation. As said, Mr. Kesh had done something very similar in 2011. Randy reinformed us about his flying car project at the time, which was in a way scuttled. And hopefully we can now perhaps as he said, maybe that was a good thing, and now it's developed even further. So we'll see much more system available to us than.
If you take the fact that most EVs, the battery weighs 1,000 to 1,500 pounds, just the battery. You take that out of the car and you put Kesha's anti-grav technology in it, you won't need any of that stuff.
It'll be light.
You might have to have some kind of little motor in the colder countries to provide, air conditioning and heat. But in terms of weight savings, then you could put that into other safety features.
Absolutely. Oh, there's so much that can be done. And of course, the battery of the materials that are needed and the disposal of it is a huge problem. And as Mr. Kesh said, it's almost like an electric car putting yourself in a microwave, or maybe even worse. I think there's studies. So I think, as he said earlier, we're going to leapfrog over the electric car. Ike, I saw your mic come open. Did you want to add something, please? Or Milan, did you finish?
No, yeah, that also one other thing. I remember way back when Mr. Kesha was talking about that we're gonna put ourselves in a bubble and then you can travel like that. Does that have anything to do? That's probably a plasma thing, or is it what he's trying to build?
Yeah, some people are still going to want to use the technology, but really in the matter state. Maybe they're not ready for the transmutation. As he said, to accommodate both, working in the matter state and working in the energy dimension, your preference. And there's benefits in understanding and traveling in both dimensions. We just haven't understood it fully. But thank you for that. Ike, did you want to add anything if you're still here? I thought I saw a hand come up. Maybe he was just leaving the meeting. Okay, if any other comments or questions, keep playing the game and studying the workshops. And as I said, that's my new test. I'm going to listen to the workshop as I play the game. So that'll be, as he said, making a new creation in a way, and we'll see what that tastes like, or if I notice anything.
I got something off the topic. Does anybody keep dozing off when meanwhile Mr. Kesh is talking, and then coming back up, waking up?
Sure. Less lately than in previous times. As he said, most people can't handle a 3 or 2 or 4 hour session. Sometimes our train of thought is exhausted within 20 minutes, but that's okay. You're growing into it, and we know the soul never sleeps. So whatever's happening is the soul is fully aware and awake for that interaction, let's say. But the physicality will sometimes need to rest. And as Mr. Kesh said, when you're using your brain and you're using your thinking, you're expending much, much more energy than someone who's working at hard labor, even though you would think it's the opposite. Someone carrying heavy stones every day and making brick walls and things like that, you would think they use much more energy. But apparently the brain and the thinking uses much more energy than the physical matter state exertion, if my understanding is correct.
Well, what's hilarious for me is, I work third shift, right? So when I come home, I'm up or whatever, and I listen to it, and all of a sudden, boom, doze off, and then just about at the end, boom, wake up. And then during the weekend, I also, as I said, well, I got to back it up so I can listen again. And then same thing, even though I'm wide awake, as soon as I start listening, all of a sudden, boom, I doze off, and then I go back, rewind, and listen again.
Well,
so I don't know if that has anything to do with the hypnotism or not, or.
Yeah. At least you're feeling peaceful enough to rest. Isn't that nice?
Yeah.
The physicality is, again, they're feeding the soul. The soul will teach the physicality. I think that's the process that's going through the game right now, where you just play and your process. This is a reactor in a type of way, even though we don't perhaps see it. He said there's hidden technologies and knowledges that man is not aware of, I think, that will be or are starting to be embedded within this process. So you just play the game and you teach yourself to be peaceful. And
I'd like to,
yes, go ahead.
yes, I'd like to add to that conversation because when I was first learning about advanced knowledge and I tried to listen to lectures, I too would fall asleep. And what was confounding to me was that when I would re-listen to the same lecture, I would fall asleep at the exact same point. And, so you say, well, I've sort of missed it. But then once we started to understand what was going on, if I can use the analogy of a computer, and if you understand what they call a wait state in a computer, so the central processing unit receives an external command from the keyboard. It needs to integrate that external command with the internal memory. That's the hard drive. And then it has to feed back to acknowledge that it's processed that. And then as a separate step, it then transmits that new process to the screen. So the video of the CRT aspect of it, or the screen aspect of it, is a product of the external input integrating or interacting with the memory. It's a separate step, and it has been historically the delay in the whole thing. So one of the contributions of the gaming industry is that it has brought, and I was going to say fast forward, but it's, 30 years is not very fast. And considering the fact that we had flat screen TVs when I was a teenager. So there's nothing very fast in that advancement. But in a way to bring it forward, the gamers were demanding a video presentation that could keep up with the external input. And the only way to do that is to have a dedicated central processing unit for the video exclusively. And then the screen itself would have to have a refresh rate that would be comparable. And so when you go to a computer store and you look at the variety of monitors out there, one of the key differences between a monitor that costs, say, $100 and one that costs $1,000 or $2,000 is that refresh rate. And the gamers demand the higher refresh rate because they are in a killing game. And so it becomes a matter of survival. If you can click on your keyboard and see the result on your screen, then you can react faster. And the one who reacts fastest obviously ends up being the winner. The carrying it forward with this discussion of the games, so anyway, the conclusion, what I wanted to say with the video is that the same thing happens with our vision. We do not need our vision to process the information. So you have absorbed that information within your, shall we say, infrastructure, your brain, your soul has absorbed that information and will facilitate the processing of that information on an as need be basis. So the fact that you don't remember having heard that, you will maybe have a deja vu moment, or you'll have a epiphany and you say, oh yeah, I now understand this process, but I don't know how I understand this process. So you don't need to process with your eyes the information that you learn. So that's on that point. The second point I wanted to make is with respect to the games, television and video games are time consuming. And so the game of the Get Plasma that the foundation has put forward is to promote peace. So it's not a killing game. It's to promote patience. So it's not a clicking game. That's not a fast clicking game. There are some components in it. And now that they've introduced a 100 travel limit per day, it restricts, mathematically restricts your optimum travel time to about 2.5 hours per day. And when you consider how much time we spend in front of the TV, or how much our youth, and I'm telling you, our youth is spending an enormous amount of time on the games, and you can see it. There are some gamers who play 3/4 of the day, or even 24 hours a day. They get so engrossed into it, what they call a virtual reality. And the damage is alarming. They take on this vegetative process, mind-numbing activity, surreal world, and a disconnect from the social, what they call social media. There's nothing social about social media. It's dysfunctional, it's disjointed. And we become overly dependent on it. This platform exemplifies the benefits of social media. We can connect worldwide with people and communicate that well in a physical way. But understand that that is a product of our plasmatic system. And so, as we understand the other side of our nature, as we become aware of our other side, we really have to find that inflection point. So please stay tuned to the next exciting episodes, and thank you for your questions and your participation. Back to you.
I can add to that conversation, Alex, about the gamers. The average human eye, we can only see 30 to 60 frames per second, but the brain can record up to 300 frames per second.
Oh, wow.
Never mind what the soul does. So this is why really spending to go to 240 hertz gaming, your eye can only see 60 frames anyway. But again, it's the brain. And it's like you say, they get wrapped in like a trance. It's the same thing if you go to gambling casinos and watch people. Some people will sit in front of that machine for hours. That's why in all the gambling casinos, there's no windows. There's no idea of what time it is, so they can play all day long. And they pump ozone into the thing to keep them fresh, and free coffee. And, that's to me, that's a total manipulation of the energy field of a human being.
That's right. So please include pachinko, and you've already mentioned casinos, gaming.
What's pachinko?
It's an Oriental game. It's basically, it's what do you call it? It has a plunger with a steel ball, and it goes to the top of the screen, and the ball comes cascading down, and whichever spot it lands on determines. It's like one of those things that you get on Let's Make a Deal or something like that.
Oh, okay.
And it's hypnotizing. And in order to keep people coming, they keep changing the face of the game. It's a picture, just so that it gives it a different background, so that you don't have the monotony. With the cash game, there is a reward. So it is designed to eliminate poverty. There is another bonus to it. There's an educational aspect to it. We've seen many laughable videos on YouTube where they ask people to name 3 countries, and they'll name a city or something like that. They don't even know what a country means. They just have no education. And you would think with the advent of YouTube, and I find it amazing the number of things that you can learn. You can punch in a question, and suddenly you become an expert car mechanic. Not to say that that's a substitute for practical experience, but it certainly does open up the door. And I know for myself, I would have saved a lot of money if I would have had that capability when I was younger, because I look back at the bills I paid on car repairs, and it all stems from my lack of knowledge. And when you have lack of knowledge, then you pay dearly for it. So gaining knowledge can be very profitable, and it's something that we need to understand. But more importantly, gaining knowledge gives us a sense of freedom that is tangible and real. And on that basis, you understand why there's a restriction to that. So with the advent of the hovering plasma board, the real question then becomes is, why is it being released now? Very suspicious, isn't it? Why wasn't it released before? We've had it all along, but we weren't allowed to release it. Now all of a sudden some, other company claims to be releasing this. Or did they develop it, or what did they do? How did they get that? Did they get it Einstein's way, or was it part of the Big Bang Theory?
I'll never.
Conjecture on my part, but we have to look at the new way of understanding, the new way of learning, and take things into context. Our children have been used as a weapon against us, and we need to re-educate, make them aware, and get them back into the reality of the real world. And that involves the plasma science and the manifestation of the inertia density manifestation in physicality. So we are doing multitasking and multi-goal participation at the same time. So let's keep it going. Thank you so much.
Just a clarification, Alex, you said that you're only allowed to play this game how much time?
100 trips per day.
Is that right? Okay. Okay, I wasn't aware of that. Maybe that's why I'm frozen out of the game. Maybe I made 100 trips or something. It didn't seem like it because at 2 minutes, you could only make 30 trips an hour or less.
Yeah, and when a gamer who's used to playing 16 hours a day, you have no chance. So this is not a competition, okay? In terms of reward, everyone has an equal opportunity for that reward. So if someone is, shall we say, dominating the board for 3 hours, the other 21 hours are still wide open. So we have to understand that right now the number of participants is over 500, or shall we say under 600. What happens when that changes by orders of magnitude, 6,000 or 60,000? How are we going to navigate 195 countries with 60,000 participants? I can't imagine what the board is going to look like, and I can't imagine, how that is going to be done. But I'm sure the programmers in the background have anticipated that and will provide the solution. So that's what the purposes of the beta program is, to iron out the bugs, because once we go live on the 21st, the game will be for keeps.
Yeah, the first initiative was to travel to each country twice. And of course, if you go to your inventory on this side of the board, you can see that it keeps track of your countries. Now, the second time when your consciousness or your enlightenment went to zero, we traveled 2 more times to the countries. It went back to 0, and then we brought it back to 2. Now I've reached level 5, or some other people have as well. Your enlightenment was reset, and I believe at level 5 they want you to visit each country, is it 32 times? Now I was just doing some simple calculations here. Let's just go to our blog. And again, there's not been full. Let's see if we can read the English post, and then we're going to arrive here. So somehow I went from level 1 to level 5. Now they're asking you to visit each country 32 times. Is that correct? I was doing a simple calculation, and if it takes you 2 minutes on average to visit 195 countries. That's about 5.6 hours of play. And as Alex said, you can't complete it all in a day. I didn't realize you're limited on these. But if we were to take that 5.6 hours reaching each country, is it twice? So if it's 5.6 hours to reach 32 visits, that would take you about 180 hours if you were to be there constantly without missing. And then, of course, we don't play constantly. We play a little bit and then do something else and so on and so forth. So that's quite a bit of time put in the game to reach the 180 hours. And then it grows, it doubles from there and doubles again, again. So apparently that process is put in place to touch you in a way in the background, I think, perhaps. And that's why they're raising this idea of how many you need to be.
Well, I'm very glad that you showed that because many of us are on level 8. We jumped from level 1 to level 8, and it hasn't been working properly.
Alex said she went to level 8 as well. And level 8, you would have to visit each country 256 times.
No, but there's no justification for us to go. I think what you should do is go level by level.
Okay.
So I think it's a glitch in the program. And as we're going through the beta testing, these glitches come out, and that has to be revised. So you're on a different beta test than we are. Because you only have 17 players, and we have almost 550 or something like that. So your board is different from my board.
Okay.
And you're on level 5, and I'm on level 8, and I'm clearly have no business being on level 8. So that's where the debugging, shall we say, or the beta testing is all about. The good news is all of our efforts are being carried forward. And so that gives us a bit of a head start into once March 21st carries on. So there is always a reward. But this is not something that, you really don't have time to devote in your life to playing that game like a gamer does. So by putting that restriction of the number of moves, where do you get that time from? So let's understand that we waste a lot of time watching TV. I don't know if you've ever had the experience of watching reruns. I would say that that's a double waste of time. Watching reruns is very good if you miss something and you want to understand something better. But if you're watching a sitcom or some kind of movie that is just basically for entertainment, in many ways that's a waste of time. It's just, shall we say, allowing you to live in a virtual reality, and it's a form of escapism. If you want to escape, you can escape with this, and it'll become very productive, because I think the educational aspect of this game has just begun. That's my position. Because I'm seeing the benefits of it alone. Imagine if you can name the capital of every country. Imagine if you could just name every country. So, I've never been able to do that, and this game is actually teaching me on how to do that. So even an old dog can learn new tricks, but I cannot compete against a gamer who's playing for 20 hours a day and eating pizza and Coke, right?
It's not a game of competition. It's a game of cooperation.
Yeah, and we need to get our youth back to being productive.
Okay, any other thoughts on the game? I've learned a couple things already today, realizing that there's a governor or a limit on it and so on and so forth.
Question. I'm still on level 1, and I don't see how I am relating to anybody other than myself at this point. Does that come later? Like a
Uh,
cooperative kind of thing? Because I'm feel like I'm all by myself.
Oh, no, no. There's new gamers coming on all the time. So, everyone
No, what
gains
I mean is
experience.
I'm not interacting with anyone. Is there an interactive part of it?
Well, there is a chat and there is a blog. You can speak to others. And I just clicked on what was known as the marketplace. And I think this is part of the association work here, where if you're looking for something and someone else is looking for something and they trade with you as part of the association and the funds are guaranteed by the Keshe Foundation, you will start to interact with many more people, I think. But again,
Okay, hopefully.
in the beta phase of it. So it's going through its perfecting, let's say. And we're all helped just by playing it. Yes?
There are a few new little quirks that are coming out. What they call like a ritual circle, where you need more than one participant to claim the reward. And I've seen some of these require as many as 9 players. So there have been appeals on the chat. I'm sitting there waiting for the reward, and I can't do anything until I have a second player. Could you please come and join me? And that throws the cooperative light on it. Then there are other little quirks that allow you to donate, because that is a reward in itself. So these are new concepts that are constantly being brought into the game. I don't think at this point in time that we have seen the full scope of the game, because in my mind, I still have difficulty understanding how we're going to have hundreds of thousands of people playing this game on this board. But when you look at the war games that they have with the Xbox and the PlayStation, they are obviously serving thousands of people, and they're all playing interactively. But they're promoting a kind of mindset that is counterproductive. So, Irma, I think as you get better at the game, I think you'll find the added enjoyment in that regard. We take the greed, we take the competition out of the game, and I have to tell you that's a challenge for us, because in the process of our travels we acquire things, and we have targets, in those acquisitions, and as Mark brought out, we have to complete the visitations of the countries. There's no point as going to the same country 100 times and not being able to advance in that level, because so we have to have a how shall we say it, a plan on how to go, and that will allow us to have more diversity within the game and avoid the kind of greed and domination that transpires in other games.
And another thing I was wondering about is that most of these resources are offered in what we know to be the poorest country. So I had the sense that I was going to the poorest countries and taking things from them. How does that work?
Oh, no, no, they're all equal.
But I mean, like Canada or North America, there's nothing offered, so there's nothing to be taken from there. It's all like when you look here, it's all like the Caribbean or African coast or whatever, where all those
Yeah,
things
but
are offered.
look at the number of countries. You talk about Canada, and U.S. and Mexico, part of the North American continent, but you look at all the countries in Europe and all the ones in Africa. So of course there's going to be more in those other areas. So it just makes the game well, it makes the game more realistic, because this is how the world is partitioned off at this point in time. And it's not a matter of picking on any country with respect to its poorness or greatness. Just as an aside, one thing that I notice is that when I leave a country that has given me rewards, and when I leave it, it seems to generate more rewards. And I've already been there, and there's a tremendous urge to go back and collect additional rewards. So your presence in a country, and your collection of those rewards actually manifested to that country being able to offer more.
Right.
Okay.
They're all pre-mined resources out of the fields of the universe, so you're not taking anything from any country, as I'm understanding it.
Exactly.
You don't have to mine anything. It's already been mined to the level Mr. Kesh said for 100 years. So you're not taking from any country. You may be giving from the country, but these are mined out of the fields, as I understand it. The books of wisdom, the book of meditation, and the energy drinks.
Okay. Thank you.
You can give them if a beacon arises, what they call a beacon. And it's almost looks like a small radio tower. You click on that and it asks if you can contribute anything out of the resources you've collected.
And remember, as Mark said, if he's listening to a lecture that has been recorded, you can play the game at the same time. So, one doesn't really become that much of a distraction from the other. So it's just a better use of time. You can even do that while you're watching TV, for that matter, but it would be very difficult for you to play this game and play a war game at the same time, because the click rate and the refresh rate on the screen is vital to your survival. So this game is more like a chess game.
Okay, any other thoughts or comments? But this earning of the Kesh coin will become the effort of the man in the very near future, I think, and we'll see more. As he said, there's much more to be announced as the coming time.
Well, let's remember this, please. What game do you know of that is going to contribute to peace and prosperity on this planet? Thanks, everybody.
Okay, and I guess you'll give us the answer next week?
Well, I can't answer that question because I haven't been playing games for a long time. I was fascinated with the games when they came out on the computers, and I found myself getting addicted. And like, talk about a waste of time. Wow. So,
Well,
yeah.
As I said, to reach that level number 5, if it's 180 hours and you're only allowed 2 hours a day of play, that's going to take you 90 days on average, probably more, to get to that point. So as Mr. Kesh said, this is not a game to play and finish. It's a continuous process going on.
There you go.
All right. If there's any other questions or comments, please feel free. Randy? Maybe not. Just the mic open. Okay, I'm going to play the final.
Hello. Hello. I am playing daily, but little time because when the close, I wait for 2 or 3 days for can continue. I decide no close it more because it's not possible. I don't know. Maybe it's a problem. I told to Eggman about that because maybe it's not only my problem. So thank you so much. But it's time for tell you about the from the Universal Council. Thank you so much, beautiful souls, because you daily and all the time we construct the peace around the world and of course around the universe, because give our knowledge about the knowledge of the creator and give our soul with love and peace for all beings at the earth and the universe all the time. Thank you so much, because we are the soul of peace. Thank you, thank you.
Thank you, Elizabeth.
I invited all the time present. You saw with us, and all the time present with the all beings in existence, and of course, daily 9 p.m. Centralist time, unified like a one soul with the soul of the creator, of course, to being the way for the peace. Thank you so much.
Thank you again, Elizabeth. and everyone. We appreciate your presence, as I said earlier. So we continue on. It's basically being laid out, and Mr. Kesh is calling the plays, and he's just asking us to support the system and encourage the system. So he's got the real easy work of creating the cosmic ray material, and we have the tougher work of promoting the game. But I think it'll get easier as we start to see testimonials of people coming out of poverty by playing this game. And this will probably be one of the more powerful testimonials. We often see on television where they're trying to raise funds and they're sending children to school and they give them a little uniform and some feeding and the rest. But it doesn't work. It's never worked. They're still trying to raise money to do the same thing. But with this, I think we'll see the people themselves bringing themselves out of poverty. And this is a whole new understanding of what man can achieve now that the conditions are set for us to live not such a harsh life on such a beautiful planet. So thank you all again.